Welcome, beloveds, to Nurture the Soul. I am your host today, and just your host. We have another moderator, which I'm excited for. I am Reverend Ellie Hutchison. I'm the Minister for Congregational and Community Engagement with the Faith Info team, and we are part of the Love of Church at the national setting of the United Church of Christ. I use they, them pronouns. I have a blonde pixie haircut. And today I am wearing a black tank top with a peach suit jacket and clear, long, dangly earrings with peach flowers in it. Nurture the Soul is a weekly webinar series that provides you with a multitude of practical, educational, innovative, and formational resources to engage with the critical topics facing our communities right now. This webinar centers the curiosity and care towards the collective liberation for all of God's creation. And we feature an array of thought leaders to delve deeply into the topics that help us live into a gospel for such a time as this. Beloveds, we hope that this virtual space is a space for connection that cultivates a curious and loving community, and that you join us every Thursday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or from time to time at different times, such as today, for Nurture the Soul. And we also have special offerings. So please check out www.ucc.org/events for a list of all of our digital program offerings. And of course, you can check us out on any of our social media platforms. Today and all of our Nurture the Soul webinars are recorded, and the link will be sent out to you within 72 hours or so, or you can save the Nurture the Soul playlist on YouTube, and a link will be placed into chat for that. And for a limited time, I'm asking that if you are an artist or you are delving into the art expression as a way to help us make sense of the world, please reach out to me via the email address that was used to remind you of today's webinar. I'd love to talk to you about an upcoming Nurture the Soul webinar series. And beloveds, if these conversations move you, if what's offered here today helps to enhance your ministry or even nurtures your soul, we hope that you consider donating to the annual fund of the United Church of Christ. And you can do that by texting the letters UCC to the numbers 41444. These small tokens have huge impacts in helping us to resource you and your community and in innovative and engaging ways. I want to thank you for supporting us always, but really so much so for being with us today. Before I introduce this week's guest, I'd like to remind you to use the chat feature to share where it is that you're zooming in from and to continue the conversation amongst each other. There's also the emotions. You can use your emotions key as well to let the speakers know that you've loved what they said or you're celebrating their words. We also have a Q&A at the end of this webinar, and there is a Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen as well. Again, you can find all of these, the chat bubble and the Q&A feature look like a dialogue bubble, one with a question mark in the middle for your Q&A, and then the other has 3 dots, otherwise known as an ellipses, in the middle for chat. This webinar and our guests today are a part of a longer series, and at the start of every year, Nurture the Soul has partnered with publishers such as Pilgrim Press and Chalice Press to highlight the books that came out in the last quarter of last year or are forthcoming. And we have had an exciting list of topics and authors that we've got to engage deep in conversation with so far this year, and today is no different. Our guests today are Reverend Shari Prestemon, who is our Associate General Minister, congratulations, and Co-Executive Director of Global Ministries for the Love of Neighbor Ministries, and thought leader, theologian, author, and so much more. We are joined today by Mira Rizeq. Thank you so much for joining us today. I would like to welcome our guests to the screen. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Shari, to go ahead and start our conversation. And Mira, you can come on screen too. Again, just know that you can put your Q&A into that feature at any time you want. I would be happy to be able to come on with about 20 minutes left in our webinar to be able to engage you all in conversation from there. I am just so excited to be here in this conversation. This is our last officially scheduled one for this book, but we know that we'll be back for more. And happy belated International Women's Day to you both.
Perfect segue, Ellie. Thank you so much for hosting us today, and welcome to all of you. I'm delighted you're here to get acquainted with someone who has long inspired me, and I know will inspire you as well. I get to introduce Mira Rizeq to you. Mira is a Palestinian who was born in East Jerusalem. She has a master's degree in business administration and a second master's degree from The Hague in international development. She is a recognized leader with over 35 years of local, regional, and international experience in development and advocacy. Our paths first crossed when Mira was one of our international partners serving on the Global Ministries board from 2010 to 2018. At that time, Mira was the National General Secretary at the YWCA of Palestine, which is one of our treasured global partners. She served as National General Secretary at the Y for 14 years. In 2019, she was elected as the president of the World YWCA board, and she will complete her second term in that role in 2027. Mira is a passionate activist working for justice, for human rights, and especially the rights of women. She is fiercely committed to the future of her beloved Palestine and to pursuing a day where all have peace with justice. What's more, she is a person of gentle compassion, deep wisdom, and a delightful sense of humor. She is also one of the authors that contributed to a recently published book through Chalice Press, Rooted in Faith and Justice: Christian Calls to Conscience and Cries for Peace in Palestine. I'm honored to call Mira my friend, and so grateful that all of you today have an opportunity to hear from her and to glean her wisdom. Mira, thank you so much for spending this time with us today. And Mira, you are on mute. There we go. Welcome, Mira.
Thank you. I'm so delighted to be here. I'm privileged, I'm honored, and especially that you're facilitating that session, Shari. That we have a special bond and we have a special friendship. So it does mean a lot to me. But I have been a long-timer friend and, supporter for Global Ministries and UCC. So it's a great pleasure really to be here.
I'm glad you are.
And I'm grateful, especially that you are giving this opportunity for a Palestinian woman to be heard, for our voice to be heard, for us to educate the world around what is happening in Palestine. I really appreciate, and on behalf of myself and all the Palestinians, again and again, I say thank you. Global Ministries has been a big supporter, a big advocate for peace and justice in Palestine. Thank you again.
It's our privilege. It's our privilege. So let's start there with what's happening in Palestine today. I mean, we have watched since October of 23, certainly what's been unfolding in Gaza and the horrors of that experience for people there. But I must say at this point, we're not getting much news at all about what's happening there or elsewhere in Palestine. And when we do, it's still not a very comprehensive look that we get from our media. So, Mira, I wonder if you could begin today by describing for all of us a little bit about what daily life is like today in Palestine, and particularly considering your context there in East Jerusalem.
Mhm. Thank you, Shari. Well, as you know, the Palestinian issue has not started in October 2023, but rather in 1948. I don't want to talk much about that, but you know very well that we are living under an occupation, a settler colonial occupation that has used every method, every strategy to evacuate us, to push us out, to enforce all kinds of, policies and all kinds of mobility restrictions, so that the people can take it no longer. So life for us is not an easy life. Moving from one place to another is really, I mean, a struggle. People take it for granted, like for me, I live in Jerusalem. Ramallah is only 15 minutes under usual circumstances. It might take me 2 hours, 3 hours maybe to go through the checkpoints, the search, go around, and maybe there is more than one checkpoint, closures and so on, go back roads and all that. So life is miserable. But what is more miserable is since the genocide in Gaza, I mean, that has been really the culmination of the situation over the years. As you know, although people are talking about roughly maybe 60,000 being dead and over 100,000 being injured, there are several statistics today actually saying that there are thousands and tens of thousands under the rubble, and there is an estimation that 160,000 have been killed in this latest genocide in Gaza and over 200,000 injured. And that the 2.5 million are squeezed in areas and keep moving from one area to the other to survive and have been pushed out and pushed in different areas in Gaza. For the last 10 days, as you know, Gaza has been completely closed off. No food, no medication, no energy, no fuel. You can imagine, especially the situation of children dying out of hunger and starvation or sickness. So many children are dying because of the cold. There's no shelters, of course. So it's miserable in Gaza. But by the way, it's not only miserable in Gaza. The same thing is repeated in the West Bank. There has been a lot of attacks in the West Bank, in Tulkarem, in Jenin, in Nablus. Already we're talking about 60,000 Palestinians displaced from the 3 northern districts. And the last few days, they also have started attacks. And I'm talking about airstrikes, tanks going into, towns and villages and cities in Hebron, in Bethlehem. Actually, today, they went into the Nativity Square and they went into Hussan in Bethlehem. And also the last 2 days, there have been attacks in East Jerusalem, and there have been 2 young men have been killed in East Jerusalem, and specifically in the area of Sheikh Jarrah and other surrounding areas. So this is life for us. It's terror and horror every day. Every day, people being killed. Every day, people being harassed, physically harassed. We have to cross through checkpoints. We don't know if we can cross or not. It's very unpredictable. So we live in a constant state of fear, unpredictability, harassment, imprisonment. Just name it. Anything you can imagine under the sun.
And you've mentioned checkpoints, and I know that also during this period, the number of checkpoints has increased exponentially. Is that correct?
Yes, that's true. And by the way, there are what we call flying checkpoints. So they keep putting checkpoints, they keep changing where the checkpoints are and moving them from one area to the other. And of course, the same practices are continuing. They are refuting, Jerusalemites from their residency rights and the ID. Lots of people are losing their identity cards in Jerusalem. Home demolishing is continuing. There is the wall, of course, which makes things very difficult. And as I said, passing through the checkpoint. But then, all this is the higher objective of all that is that we are living under a Zionist colonial project whose main objective is to ethnically clean this whole area so that they can create a purely Jewish state. This is what the issue boils down to. And I'm not sure people do understand it as such.
Well, the picture that you paint of life now in Palestine, not only in Gaza, but also in the West Bank and in Jerusalem, is dire at so many levels, and decreasing in experience all the time, getting worse and worse for all of you. And you also reminded us, importantly, that this did not begin as of October 7th, 2023. That actually we can go back to 1948, and there's a whole history that we can discuss when it comes to the occupation of Palestine. I wonder, Mira, would you talk specifically about the unique experience of women in Palestine during the occupation? What is that like? How is that different?
Well, for women, the feeling of security and safety is critically important, even more than men, and that is almost absent under occupation. So, because Israel has been demolishing so many homes, you can imagine so many thousands and thousands of families have been displaced. And this actually has very special impact on women, much more than men, because at the end, they are the ones who have to keep the family together, who have to cater for the needs of the children and everyone. So can you imagine when the whole family is displaced and is out on the street, what the women, what the mothers, the sisters, the grandmother, or daughters face having to keep that family together? Well, more importantly, that there has been a lot of physical harassment on checkpoints, being practiced on women, specifically women. And so we have seen and we've heard of so many stories where the Israeli army would order women to actually take off their clothes on checkpoints, and they know that we come and we live in a culture that is relatively conservative culture. For us, this is very dehumanizing. For any human being, this is dehumanizing, but especially for Palestinian women. This is very indignifying. And then, women have to, maybe stand hours and hours, on the checkpoints when they have to go back and cater for the family and do other errands. So this is why women's mobility have been heavily restricted in the West Bank. The women choose not to be crossing checkpoints. And all studies have also proven that young women have there's an increase in dropouts, school dropouts, because they don't also want to be crossing checkpoints. And for them, it's frightening. It's humiliating. It creates a sense of insecurity and worry, because they don't know whether they will do it, they will not do it. But then also, there have been so many sick women who have had to be transferred to Jerusalem for Jerusalem hospitals. Then the ambulances have been stopped. So many pregnant women have died on the checkpoints. We've seen that. So many sick women have also died on the checkpoints because the ambulances have not been allowed to enter. So women have, these are also things that men face. But when women face these, it creates, a really severe state of anxiety and fear and insecurity.
As you talk about it, Mira, what strikes me is that women are the most vulnerable to these indignities that you describe, and just the hardship of daily life, living under occupation. And at the same time, they are required to be the most resilient because they're also carrying so much in the Palestinian society and in the family structures.
Yes. Yes, women really, I mean, are the backbones of families here. And they play a very important role in keeping not just the family, but the whole society together. And this is not an easy job in a situation like ours. So, I mean, I don't know whether you have seen in Gaza, I mean, the extent to which women are willing to sacrifice. But, you know, when the Israeli army were shelling and bombing, you know, children and women and communities in Gaza, women were actually kneeling down and covering their children with their bodies, choosing to die to protect their children from dying. And in most of the cases, they all ended dying. But this is what Palestinian women face, and this is what Palestinian women have been doing. So there is nothing under the sun that Palestinian women are not willing to do. And also, you know, Palestinian women face a lot of physical harassment. They have been very active, I mean, on the political level, on the economic level, on the social level. So many women have been in prison. So many women have been, you know, undergoing physical harassment. And while in prison, so many women have been raped. And now, by the way, just today on the news, I was shocked. This is the first time I hear it. And that was on Al Jazeera, the Arabic, that settlers have gone into some of the communities in, you know, around Jenin and Tulkarem, and they have been physically harassing and raping women, settlers. This is the first time I hear that. So it is really, I mean, the extent of violence that's being, you know, inflicted on women is just, you know, there is no end to that.
Beyond the pale. Yeah. You talked about the dehumanization a little bit ago, at the checkpoints and in the prisons, that as you described it, and now this latest report. But dehumanization is the point, isn't it? It's at the heart of occupation and what makes occupation work.
Exactly.
Yes.
And they, you know, they don't treat us as humans, for sure. They don't. I mean, you have heard for sure some of the parliamentarians in the Israeli Knesset, you know, talking during genocide, you know, using, you know, I can't even repeat the words. It's like, finish them off, kill them all, you know, because we don't mean anything. We're not humans. We don't mean anything for the Israelis. And it's been horrendous, you know, to constantly hear that, you know, this is who we are. This is how they look at us. But I think if there is anything good, and this is ironic, that has come out of this very extreme situation, you know, in Gaza and the latest genocide, is that most of the world cannot say now we haven't seen and we don't know. I think the world, the international community is starting to see it, the extreme atrocities being practiced against us. They're seeing the situation. Still, unfortunately, the governments are not changing their positions, but at least the international community is so much in solidarity, and we are very thankful for that as Palestinians and Palestinian women.
Mira, you said in the chapter that you wrote for the book that I mentioned earlier, one of the ways that you described the role of Palestinian women in your society is as shock absorbers. What did you mean by that?
Well, as I said, you know, because, you know, Israel is attacking not only, you know, attacking us by, you know, arms or airstrikes, but it is actually doing everything it can to disintegrate the Palestinian civil society. And the women are playing a very, very important role in keeping families together, keeping the society together, and doing lots of collective work together to sustain, you know, that family and the society and the nation at large. And we've done that as women through collective work, joining cooperatives, joining NGOs, joining women networks, There is the Palestinian Union of, the Union of Palestinian Women, which is an umbrella organization that gathers all the women political parties and also civil society, representations. All these collectives actually have helped women to face the situation, to also to strategize uh, how to keep the society together, and especially also, since the economic situation has been deteriorating very badly and the poverty has been increasing, women have also come in to participate more and more in the economy and in the household income. So many women, thousands of women are working. Well, unfortunately, more in the informal sector, which is not protected, of course, and there is a lot of abuse, but still they get some money and some funding and some pay to keep the family together. So when the men are at war or imprisoned or deported or whatever, it's the women who are the breadwinners. It's the women who are carrying the burden, whether it's the physical burden, the economic burden of keeping the family, or the social burden of keeping the network and the society at large. So yes, and we've been creative. I mean, women have been creative in so many ways in doing it. You can see extreme creativity despite the suffering, extreme creativity for Palestinian women, how they do this.
Yeah, so your usage of the term shock absorbers makes sense as you describe this, for sure. But you're also sharing with us a picture of Palestinian women that has them at the center of leadership in Palestinian society, both informal and formal leadership, and working with the NGOs, strategizing, organizing, and taking care of the home fires at the same time. You, I know, are a Palestinian woman who is a role model for others in Palestine, because you also have been at the center of all of that, leading the way in so many different ways. I wonder, who are your Palestinian women role models? Who inspired you?
Oh, so many. But to start with, my mother, who had to leave, and she fled from Jaffa in 1948. So they lost their house, they came into the old city. And because of the war, there are so many injured people, all over the streets. My mom at the time was just like hardly 21 years old. And my grandmother is a nurse, she's a staff nurse. So she asked my grandmother to help her to start up something, a clinic, or, and that's how she started the first mother and child center in the old city. It's the first. It is still going on. It was initially under the church, the Greek Catholic Church, but then now unfortunately, well, maybe fortunately, I don't know, it's no more a health center. Now they converted it. This charitable society converted it into a nursery and a preschool. But for years, for over 60 years, it served as a very large medical center in the old city, especially for women and children. All kinds of specializations, and even feeding children, nutrition, literacy classes for women, and all that. My mom started it, and my mom was going around to doctors, pulling them to come to the center and volunteer, and they continued volunteering for over 20 years because they had no money. And she said, I cannot pay you. And, I'm like you, we all need to volunteer to save our society. This is my mom. And, well, I'm not exactly following her. I can never do what she's done. But I learned a lot of what loving your country means, and what volunteering and what responsibility means. And the other woman who has really very much affected me is Doris Salah, who passed away just recently. She used to be the General Secretary of the YWCA of Palestine for almost 40 years. She finished her term in the year 2000. She was so passionate about Palestine. She was such a clever advocator on the issue of Palestine. I learned all these advocacy tools and the language, and also the historic, background and the facts from Doris. She pushed me to learn. She pushed me to learn how to present, how to talk, how to engage. And she started, pushing me into international arenas when I was even 17 years old.
Wow.
So Doris shaped me into the advocator for justice and peace that I am today, to a very large extent. My mom on one side and Doris Salah on the other side. There are other women. There's Samia Houri, there is Jean Zaru. Jean impacted me in unique ways because as a Quaker and believing in the non-violent, resistance is a new concept for me, was a new concept for me when I was, a teenager in my early 20s. Jean has really made a difference in my life and convinced me that, resistance does not need to be armed resistance. There can always be nonviolent resistance, and it can be even more effective. And truly, in the Palestinian society, we have used, especially women, very effective, and resilient resistance tools that are nonviolent, and it works.
Jean is another longtime friend of Global Ministries as well, so we also hold her in great esteem, for sure.
Yes.
I remember meeting your mother once. I was in Palestine for, I think, a conference that the Y actually brought together, and your mother was there. And I remember her as the strength of her spirit was obvious as soon as you drew near to her. And so I can imagine, especially given the stories that you've just told us, how she lives in you still. You told me once, Mira, about something she said in her last days to you. And I know it is something that also causes you to be very adamant about staying in Palestine, despite all of the hardship. Do you mind sharing that with our viewers?
Sure. My mom was towards the end, especially the last year, she was a dialysis, patient, was doing dialysis at the hospital. And then the last month or two before she passed away, she really deteriorated very fast. So we had to take her to a hospital, and unfortunately, all hospitals are either Israeli hospitals or controlled by the Israeli health system. So when she was in the hospital, she was sharing a room with an Israeli, and there were, of course, lots of, Jewish Israelis visiting the other patient. Two of them, men, had kippahs. So when she saw them, I think she was sort of hallucinating because of the medication. And she thought she was at home, and she said, "What are you doing? I closed the door and I told you not to let the Israelis come in and take over our house. We already lost one in Jaffa. It was enough. Why are you letting the Israelis in our house?" And we said, "Mom, this is the hospital. You are in a hospital." We kept reminding her. And then she would doze off and then back. But then when she woke up, she said, "We're in Jerusalem, right?" I said, "Yes, we are in Jerusalem." She said, "Listen, promise me, you will never leave Jerusalem. We Palestinians have to safeguard Jerusalem. We are responsible. We are responsible to keep it up. We are the living stones of Jerusalem. And I urge you, and I call on you, and I even order you not to leave Jerusalem." This is something I will never forget.
Yes.
My mom is so passionate about Jerusalem and feels that, because of all the Israeli policies in Jerusalem, Jerusalem has been severely evacuated. So we really have to continue to exist in Jerusalem. Otherwise, we will be facing especially Palestinian Christians in Jerusalem we've used to be almost 12, 13% of the population. We're less than 1% now in Jerusalem and in all of Palestine. So for my mom, being a passionate Catholic Jerusalemite Palestinian woman, Jerusalem is very key for her.
And you and I have had conversations in the last year even about your discernment about whether to stay in Palestine or do as friends and family have urged you to do, and go elsewhere, to other places where you have family who would receive you or friends that would receive you.
Exactly.
But I know that for you, your mother's voice in your ear and that call, or what you described as that demand, that really, in the end, was why you're staying.
It's my mother's voice to a very large extent, but also it is my love to my country
Yes.
and my passion to my country that keeps me here. So many of my friends, after the genocide started in Gaza, were calling me, writing to me, and saying, Mira, it's very unsafe. You should just pack and leave. Well, first of all, why am I different than the rest of my own population? It's unsafe for all of us, the millions of Palestinians. So it is unsafe for me and for the rest. And I'd rather be here. And I don't want to lose my house again. I keep remembering my mom. I'm not willing to leave the house and then come back and see that it has been taken over by someone, an Israeli coming from, I don't know where, Europe or Russia or the US or whatever. So, this is very serious. And I was very depressed, by the way, let me tell you, at the very beginning of the genocide. And for 3-4 months, I was almost like 20 hours a day watching news, watching, and, and also, of course, writing about the situation, issuing statements as World YWCA and so on. But there are two things that kept me going. My love to my country, my hope, and I always say, keep hope alive, never lose hope, and my faith in myself, my strength, my people, and most importantly, the collective strength for people. But overall, I have faith in justice. I have great faith in justice. Have you ever seen a system or a regime or an empire that has discriminated against, the poor, that has created slaveries over the years and in history, that has continued to exist? No, it collapsed. Injustice collapses at the end. Yes, it might take a lot of time. It might take a lot of energy. It will take a lot of organizing on our side. We might have to suffer maybe more. We already suffered for almost 80 years now, 78 years. It might take much more. I won't see peace maybe during my time, but I'm confident there will be justice and peace in Palestine sometime, because this is our historic land. We have every right to live here. We have every right to live in peace. We have every right to see that justice rules in this part of the world. And I hope that the Western governments and the rest of the world would see that this is justice. And, when we say support us, we are not talking about supporting Palestine as much as supporting justice. Support justice. And if you support justice, you will realize that you will be supporting actually the Palestinians, because we are the original owners of that land. And we have lived here for thousands of years.
I know this conviction that you have and have just articulated, a conviction that in the end, justice always wins out. It is core for you. It really defines you, and we can see it in the passion in which you talk about it. You also talked about, you used the word faith several times. Faith in your people, faith in your beloved land, faith in the possibility and the prospect for justice. I know you also have a deep faith in God. And I wonder how that faith also sustains you as you travel this journey.
Well, I have learned over the years, most of my values actually are Christian values, and all of my values, not just most. I've been risen, and I've lived all my life in a Christian family, and my mom especially is a very pious person. So God for us is our protector. God is the light, the path. When I'm desperate, I pray to God. When I'm helpless, I always think, no, you can't give up, Mira. There is God. God is there. He will be with us. He'll be with me, with my family. He will be with our community. And yes, God will guide us, and God will lead us and will shed light. And now, as we are approaching Easter and the Lenten season and resurrection,
Yes.
well, God has also shown us that after death, there is resurrection. And I believe that through all the suffering and after death of the Palestinians, there will be resurrection. And there will be peace and justice and light. We will see the light. It might not come this Easter, but it will come some Easter, and we will live freely. I'm almost convinced that this will happen. Okay? So yeah, for me, my love for God is part of me.
You just gave an incredibly beautiful sermon for all of us in this Lenten season as we walk towards the joy of Easter and the promise of resurrection. You've shared with us your core belief in the resurrection and that it will emerge and rise in your land for the Palestinian people, that there will be resurrection, that victory will come, that death will have no more sting. And so thank you for that testimony of faith. It was beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm going to shift just a little bit before I think we can receive some of the questions. Or Ellie, are you wanting to go to the questions now?
I feel like we have we have 8 questions that have come through. So I'm open to however you would like to continue.
You know, I can't imagine a better last statement for my conversation with Mira than what she just gave us. So I think let's go to your questions.
Awesome. Amen. Wow. Before we move on to our viewers' questions, I would like to invite everybody to kind of just settle in, however it is that they find themselves at this moment, and doing it safely, just taking a deep breath, breathing in through the nose, and then letting it all out. Breathing at your own pace, beloveds. Our shared stories impact our bodies in ways that we're not always attuned to. And yet I find that those who are women-identified bodies hold so much and carry so much of the world, as what I think we've heard today. And so I invite us to just breathe. I'm a somatic practitioner, so I believe in our body tells us what we need to do when we hear powerful stories like we've heard today. And so I've been swaying while Mira's been talking and sharing. So thank you, Mira, for that. Our first question was that came through is, I would like to ask about the women and the breaking of the neighborhoods. Before a neighborhood is destroyed, I imagine that women have built large communities of neighborhood women. And if so, when the homes are destroyed and the families scatter, what is the effect of losing that community and its connections, in particular on the women?
Well, there is a lot of impact. Also, families have been separated. The social networks have been also, disintegrated because of the closures, because of curfews, because of the checkpoints, the wall. That has had tremendous impact on the emotional state of women. Women have been traumatized. Women are facing, deep psychological problems and feel very much at risk. And this is where, by the way, the social networks, women's organizations, an organization like the YWCA that, for example, has been creating safe spaces for women to gather and be together, to do things together, to give strength to each other, becomes critically important. Okay. So yes, the Israelis continue to attack the unity of our civil society, but we always find ways of convening, supporting each other, talking to each other. And now with this new technology, I mean, we're always talking on Zoom, we're calling on the phone, we don't need to be physically together. Of course, it's not the same, but we still do it and do it a lot. So, yes, communication and all this emotional support is very, very important for women to continue to be resilient and continue to sustain themselves first, their families, and then the society at large.
Trying to find my mute button. Thank you very much. In all of the questions I shared with some of the tech side, how many names appeared to be women identified names on this webinar. And I think that is really uplifting and exciting. So, and of course we have some wonderful questions coming in about that. Somebody had said, is the YWCA able to function in any meaningful way to support the women in the West Bank? And can the YMCA be any support in this?
Well, we have the two organizations operating in both East Jerusalem and the West Bank, okay? And we also have even a joint program between the YMCA and the YWCA, especially the Joint Advocacy Initiative program, which is advocating for justice and peace. We have the Olive Tree campaign running under this program. But in many ways, the YWCA is very much focused on women's empowerment and women's survival and offering spaces, as I said, from women to live, to be able to do things, that they would like to do, to get the knowledge, to get the education. We offer vocational trainings, we offer all kinds of other educational opportunities for women in the West Bank. The YMCA is another, very important and crucial youth organization. We both are very youth driven, and we believe that our main mission is to empower young people, and help them see a better future. That's key. That's key to a situation like ours. Because when you talk to young people, you will see their frustration. You see that they see no future. And organizations like us is critically important in sustaining hope and light for these young people through all the programs that we do and through engaging young people actually to express themselves and their aspirations, their knowledge, and shaping their future.
Yes. Yeah, thank you for that. And I think the next question actually, I'm sorry, for those of you who don't know, I've been communicating on chat with Peter. There are some questions that have come in through chat that I think he could answer to save some more time for some other questions. So I was just, hey, can you answer this one for me? So I apologize for that. Mira, a question came in and said, what has your experiences been around interfaith alliances, such as Women Waging Peace, Women of the Sun, Standing Together, One Land for All? What is the role of interfaith organizations in supporting your efforts and those of our siblings in Palestine?
At the earlier stages, especially, talking also after 1967, there have been lots of efforts, of women from all faiths, Jewish, Muslims, Christians, coming together and trying to find common grounds. As the situation got worsened, and of course, with all the Israeli policies imposed on the Israelis themselves, not, banning them from coming into the West Bank or Gaza, that has become quite difficult. So there is a lot of interfaith dialogue amongst Christians and Muslims in this country. We have a lot of common grounds. We all basically work and fight for the same purpose, a free Palestine. We fight for justice. We find a lot of common language. We share lots of values, by the way, whether the Muslim or the Christians and even the Jews. We share lots of common values. Unfortunately, these values collapse when the political system abuses them. And when the political system, uses religion to divide and rule, and uses religion to rule, basically, if you want. So I wish that, we could stick to our values and just, get the politics out of religion in this country. Honestly, we would, and we have lived in peace before 1948, by the way. I remember my parents talking about, so many of they had so many Jewish friends, they had Muslim friends, they had Christian friends, even at the social level, not even talking interfaith dialogue. But as a YWCA, we have actually ventured into creating platforms for interfaith dialogue earlier in our work, but the situation now does not allow for that. We do not do it. It's very difficult, and I think you could see that the Israeli society is also moving very much to the right and to the extreme, and it is almost becoming very difficult to find common grounds to talk with the Israeli people living in Israel. I mean, it is shocking to see that most of the Israeli people in Israel have been supporting, for example, the genocide, continue to support the annihilation of the Palestinian people. That does not leave much grounds for even interfaith dialogue. And it's sad, it's pathetic. I don't know whether we will find ways to do that later on. And my worry actually is if we ever, are able to forge the peace agreement, reconciliation is going to be very difficult. It is going to be very difficult because the damage that has been done is great, and we need to go back to our basic values, to our basic religions, and remember that we all are equal as humans. God has created us as equals, and we all believe in the same things. And all the religions talk about love thy neighbor. So how are we practicing this? To what extent can we practice this? Not in this situation for sure. But I am hoping for the day that will come that we will do this actually.
I love that. And that brings me to I think this is a really great question, is what do women bring to the peacemaking process that has been lacking in the male-led peace process?
Well, unfortunately, in Palestine, the women have not been much involved in the peace negotiations. Informally, they are, but they're not sitting on the formal tables. I mean, even now, the negotiations for the ceasefire and all that, you don't see any women on any side, on any, so as if we don't exist. And this is dangerous, and this is unacceptable also down the road, because we constitute half the society. We have every right to be involved. And by the way, the YWCA has been pushing very much for the endorsement of the UN Security Council 1325, which calls for the participation of women in peace, and also in conflict resolution, in peace negotiations, and also in prevention of conflict. And Shari, you mentioned the conference you've been in Bethlehem. That's exactly the conference you've been in. When we launched, actually, the YWCA in Palestine brought all the women coalitions together to agree and launch the National Action Plan. And this National Action Plan actually puts forward and lays forward, very detailed interventions for women in the peace process. and in conflict resolution. But unfortunately, we still face serious constraints in implementing that, very serious constraints, whether financial, whether political, even our own political system, the Palestinian Authority. I'm not even talking about the Israeli occupation. Women have not been equally treated or equally respected or offered equal chances. Now we have more women in the government, the Palestinian government, but not enough.
Hmm.
I don't think this is fair or enough or represents the women.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. You know, if for folks that might be traveling to the West Bank,
Sorry.
what is for folks that might be traveling to the West Bank, what might be the best way for them to show solidarity while there?
Oh,
Hmm.
difficult question. I don't know how, but I think most important, I think people need to feel that they're not alone. What has helped Palestinians really have been the visiting delegations that come to Palestine. First of all, it offers a chance for the Palestinians to express their views and talk to them, but then they also feel this very important global network, whether women, churches, Christians, or disciplinary. It's very important, these exchange visits and being, standing together in events, attending, for example, joint conferences and all that. These are all very important things to be in solidarity with the Palestinians.
Hmm.
I know you have been doing this a lot, and we continue to appreciate that. And I keep saying, please continue to do this. It's really important, visiting and physically being with the Palestinians and witnessing, because if you don't witness the situation here, you cannot be in solidarity. It's very difficult to understand it.
Yeah, definitely. You may be hearing from that person who asked that question later. Somebody did share a comment that I think is an actual nice segue into a question. It is very impactful to hear you talk about your country. I'm not sure in my settings I've heard Palestine referred to as a country. I've learned a lot about the two-state solution, but I guess perhaps being uninformed, I haven't really thought about Palestine as a country. So I want to say thank you for that gift. So then that next question is, should the state of Israel exist at all, and why?
Well,
That's an easy one to help out with.
well, that's a tricky question, but I don't know if we have space left yet for a two-state solution to start with.
Hmm.
I believe Palestinians deserve to have we have every right for statehood, for having our own country, for having freedom, for having, everything that a normal country would have. We're still far, far from that. But at this stage, I think it's very hard to talk even about that when Israel is calling for complete ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians and so many governments, including, unfortunately, the US government, supporting it to do that and issuing ultimatums, that if you don't do this, we will do that, and so on and so forth. So, yes, there needs to be a Palestinian country. The question is, where are the borders? What kind of country would it be? Definitely, it has to be secular. I would say the ideal situation would be to have one country. Call it whatever you want. Call it Palestine, call it Israel, where Israelis and Palestinians live together, live in peace. It cannot be a Jewish or a Christian or a Muslim country. It has to be a secular country that gives rights to all religions to practice and to live freely. Because when religion intersects with the state, actually, and this is exactly our situation. This is the major problem for our situation, is that Israel is purely and pushing for a purely, Jewish state, thus ethnically cleansing all other religions out of this part of the world. That cannot be. So what we need, my vision, my hope, my dream, is to see one country, because it's a very small country. We can't even afford to divide it, honestly. A single state solution would be the best solution. But we're very, very far from that, very far. But I think it's doable down the road. Not during my time, for sure.
Yes, sadly. The final question, Mira, is Global Ministries and the UCC are in the United States and advocate about U.S. policy relative to the genocide. Do you have a couple sentences that you would like those of us in the U.S. Church to say to our U.S. government and all of those who support our U.S. government? I added that last part.
Wow.
What's some advice you can give us church folks to confront our government in the support of the genocide?
Well, first of all, I really want to thank you for all the statements that you have been issuing and, raising awareness around the genocide in the US. And Dr. Peter McCary has been actually sharing all this with all the Palestinian partners. We're very thankful to him and to his passionate, work for Palestine and for the whole region. I think what we would like to see is more pressure and dialogue with your Congress. I don't know how this is going to be done, but it definitely needs to be done. They are decision makers. This is where the policy is being formulated. I wish the US government, can see both sides. For years, it's just been ignoring the Palestinian side completely. It's blinding itself from seeing the truth. And I think what you need, you've been speaking the truth. You're the speaking church. You need to push your government to see the truth. Really, you need to push them to see the truth, to see the facts. And the other thing is, how much we have been disappointed as women, even in the past, when formal delegations come from different governments, that they don't even bother to connect with women and they don't hear women's voices. I don't know whether it is something you could do, but Global Ministries maybe could put together a delegation of women to talk to your Congress people, to talk to government, to talk to influential people in the US. I am convinced that women are much more convincing than men when talking to politicians, and we've seen that. I've done a lot of advocacy and speaking in my life. And in so many of the settings that I've spoken to, people have come up to me and said, you know what? If more Palestinians talk like you, we're so willing to hear you, to understand you, to be supporting you, but we don't hear that. So I'm saying to Global Ministries, is there a way where you can make your government hear what needs to be heard? I'm sorry. I thought I closed my phone, but apparently it's not. So yeah, maybe this is like dreaming or asking for too much, but you need really to work more on your government and changing policies. Well, now it might be a bit too difficult because I also see that Mr. Trump is issuing policies and that are extreme. What is going on? My God. I'm sorry.
You're fine. I want to thank you for giving us extra time today to chat with us.
Yeah. I don't know what is happening. I put it on silent, but it is not. Well, anyways. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm dreaming, but I think you will need to do more work on the government level. I know that, you have been joining forces with other churches, to try to do, dialogue with Congress people. But I think talking to your Congress people is really critical. I don't know what more to say. What are the things that need to be done and said? But for it is very disappointing, for example, that the latest envoy, Witkoff, the U.S. envoy who has just been, visiting here, all he has been trying to do is push to extend the ceasefire for another 50 days that will end on the 20th of April. And in the meantime, the US is insisting on all Israeli hostages to be released. That's the only thing that the US is seeing. But what they are not seeing is the 2.5 million Gazans that are starving, that have no medication, no shelter, that the Israelis continue to actually violate the ceasefire and is still striking over Gaza. The US government is not seeing it. So my question is, how do we make the US see this? How do we make, the delegations, the envoys that are being sent here see the truth? I don't know. I mean, it's difficult for me, but maybe we need to talk more about that and discuss maybe strategies for impacting Congress and government policy in the US.
Mira,
I'm
I
all-
think we need another webinar
Yeah, I
to
think
start organizing. So we can think about that as well. And we
Okay.
need your wisdom to do that. Ellie, should I close us?
Well, I want to thank you, Mira, for joining us today. I want to also say that Global Ministries on the website, there is the Sabeel Ecumenical Liberation Theology weekly wave of prayer. I know many of you have shared in the comments about the power of prayer. So we will put a link into our follow-up email for you all so you can follow that for sure. But I just, again, thank you for your honesty, your bravery, your heart, your storytelling, the way that you look up to other women and uplift them in your journey, Mira. Thank you, Reverend Shari, for joining us today. What a gift you both have been. And I want to invite you all for our next webinar. It's a special offering of our What's Next series, which began prior to the 2024 election and will continue into this year as a special offering designed to help educate and support the big questions for our faith at this time. The series is specifically curated to push back on the political ideology and the political divide that has become this nation's religion. To live into our still speaking God, we are the embodiment of who we are and what we are called to be to one another, whether it be spiritually, faithfully, culturally, and of course, lovingly during a time where we are being pulled apart. On Monday, March 17th at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we'll be joined by the Reverend Dwight Lee Walter, and we're going to be exploring the role of loneliness in this late stage of our global pandemic and during our divided times. We'll explore and help to raise awareness around loneliness. We'll be given some tools to empower change and move towards transforming loneliness into a portal to access, get this, empathy, solidarity, creativity, community building. And Dwight Lee is a little quirky and has a wonderful sense of humor. So I know we're going to have a lot of fun during this webinar of loneliness. I want to thank you again. And Reverend Shari, please, Mira, I'll turn it back over to you for any final thoughts and or taking us out into a benediction.
Yes, I just want to thank Global Ministries and the UCC for offering me this opportunity to have that dialogue. And Shari, I want to wish you the best of luck in this General Synod. I don't think they can find a better person than you. At least this is my opinion.
You
And
may
I
be
really-
biased.
Yes, yes, and I really hope you will make it there. And please continue to be the speaking church you are. Continue to speak the truth. Continue to be in solidarity and continue to advocate for justice. We love you. I had the best times when I was attending the board meetings, and I told you this, Shari, and I think I told Peter this. For 8 years, it was such a privilege to be on your board. So, this partnership is wonderful. It's very enriching, and you already are in solidarity by being in partnership. So please continue these partnerships in Palestine, and let's hope that there will be peace and justice, not just in Palestine, but in the US and in the whole world. And I hope that in the difficult times you are facing in the US, please remember we are also in support and we are also in solidarity with you, and we understand the gross impact that all these new policies that your president is issuing. So we pray for you, we pray for your safety, and we pray that God gives you the courage to stand up for that, because America had wonderful values in the past, and it is time for you to work hard to restore these values.
Amen to that, Mira. Amen. And I want you to know that we love you as well. I love you, dear friend. And
Thank you.
I thank God for you. We all, I know, thank God for you this day and always, for your leadership, for your passion, for your commitment to Palestine and the Palestinian people, and for your testimony of faith today and in every day that you are. So thank you so much. And thank you for the
Thank you.
word to all of us also as we depart now, to look for resurrection and to trust that justice will prevail and that resurrection and new life will emerge even in the valley of the shadow of death. God bless you all.
Amen. Thank you.
Siblings in Christ, if you are moved by this conversation, if what's been offered here has helped enhance your ministry or has nurtured your soul for the journey, please consider donating to the annual fund of the United Church of Christ by texting UCC to 41444. Your support will help to provide programs like this, which are an essential part of our ministries in the United Church of Christ. Thank you for your support. Be blessed on your journey and know that you are not alone. We are holding you in prayer. Amen.